controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Not just a quote from Orwell's 1984, but that which he chose as the slogan of its all-controlling party. And in our third story in the countdown, therein lies the sudden panic on the right to rationalize the torture of the Bush administration by claiming it was merely another instance in the history of the just, the righteous, the exceptional, pushed to the wall, and fighting back with utter distaste in the most controlled of responses with the only weapons left. To establish precedent, they will try to blame it on Bill Clinton. They will try to equate it with other acts of wars past. They will defame great men to justify pathetic ones, and do so with the most infantile of rationalizations. But they did it first. And their mouthpieces will call the current president a liar when he observes that throughout history, in circumstances far more dire, the just, the righteous, the exceptional, pushed to the wall, still did not torture.
Churchill said, "We don't torture." When the entire British, all of the British people were being subjected to unimaginable risk and threat. And the reason was that Churchill understood you start taking shortcuts, and over time that corrodes what's best in a people. It corrodes the character of a country.
Well, the right cannot let those facts go by unchallenged by lies. Winston Churchill is one of its appropriated heroes. If Donald Rumsfeld called all his administration critics the equivalents of Nazi appeasers, Churchill is the good guy in that equation, the man who fought not just the real Nazis, but first had to fight the real Nazi appeasers. At all costs, they cannot let Churchill be anti-torture. It ruins the whole Bush-Cheney right-wing lie that even the great men turn to torture when necessary. And so they turn to an eminently not-so-great man, a man whose knowledge of history seems to have been drawn in equal parts from comic books and the German apologists after the Second World War.
Churchill actually wanted to use poison gas on the Germans in violation of the Geneva Convention, but was stopped by the British War Cabinet. The Royal Air Force killed hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of civilians by targeting non-military sites. And the British operated a number of interrogation centers during and after World War II, including one called the London Cage, where German prisoners were beaten, deprived of sleep, and threatened with death. Another center was opened in Bad Nendorf on German soil after Churchill left power. It was almost like a concentration camp. President Obama's British example was wrong.
No, sorry. If that were a high school history paper, it would have earned its author a nice round F. It makes Michelle Bachmann's Hoot Smalley spoonerism from last week look good. Point by point, first, that was not Obama's British example. The president cited Winston Churchill specifically. Second, quote, Churchill actually wanted to use poison gas on the Germans in violation of the Geneva Convention, but was stopped by the British War Cabinet. The most obvious answer to that is maybe, but he didn't. However, if you want to analyze what he may or may not have wanted to do, there are copious notes. Churchill's secret memo to his military chiefs, July 1944, the British Prime Minister asks them to analyze seriously using gas against German military industrial centers. But poison gas? From Churchill's memo, item 6, if the bombardment of London became a serious nuisance and great rockets with far-reaching and devastating effects fell on many centers of our government and labor, I should be prepared to do anything that would hit the enemy in a murderous place. I may certainly have to ask you to support me in using poison gas. We could drench the cities of the Ruhr and many other cities in Germany in such a way that most of the population would be requiring constant medical attention. Wait, constant medical attention? Not just thousands of dead civilians Saddam Hussein style? From Churchill's item number 5, poison gas attacks from which nearly everyone recovers. So now we know Churchill's mind. He did contemplate retaliating with poisonous, non-lethal gas if the Germans resumed full-scale bombardment of London, but only if the bombardment became a serious nuisance. And apparently the appalling London air raids of 1940 and 1941 did not meet Churchill's criteria for resorting to those non-lethal gas attacks. 1940 and 1941 was the period President Obama was talking about. And non-lethal gas is not the same as waterboarding or torturing prisoners. And ultimately, regardless of those facts, Churchill did not do it. The Fox commentator also leaves out the fact that simultaneously in this country, the military pleaded to initiate gas warfare against Japan. And as late as 1945, the future Nobel Peace Prize winner, General George Marshall, urged that we use it. And we as a nation, like Churchill, still chose the right path. Allegation 3, the Royal Air Force killed hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of civilians by targeting non-military sites. This sounds very damning. However, A, it also has nothing to do with what Obama said about Churchill. B, its inclusion in a they did it first defense of Bush seems to conflict with the fact that in Churchill's case, the Germans actually did do it first, bombing London residential neighborhoods years before the Allies retaliated. C, virtually every nation in every war in the last 100 years has targeted non-military sites. We just did it in Afghanistan. And D, in Churchill's case, he actually tried to stop it. After the horrific bombing of Dresden in Germany in February 1945, Churchill never stopped producing historical source documents, wrote another memo so extraordinary that he was actually prevailed upon to withdraw it and replace it with something more tepid. He wrote, "It seems to me that the moment has come when the question of bombing German cities, simply for the sake of increasing the terror, though under other pretexts, should be reviewed. I feel the need for more precise concentration upon military objectives, such as oil and communications behind the immediate battle zone, rather than on mere acts of terror and wanton destruction, however impressive." Here again, vital context ignored. The British bombing of German non-military targets is used to discredit Obama's citing Churchill as somebody who would not torture. But even off on this tangent, Churchill looks nobler and nobler. He questioned the bombing. Point number 4, the British operated a number of interrogation centers during and after World War II, including one in Bad Nendorf on German soil after Churchill left power. So Obama saying Churchill wouldn't torture Germany and Germans is disproved because England opened an interrogation center at Bad Nendorf after Churchill left power? This is nonsensical, as if your TV show had won a Polk Award after you had left it and then you claimed the award was your own. Well, that's right, it did, and you did. By the way, British torture of German prisoners at Bad Nendorf, post-Churchill, it led to the court-martial in July of 1948 of a British captain on 5 counts of neglect. The British investigated whether or not they had tortured. They investigated at Bad Nendorf and at another detention center in England. One called the London Cage, where German prisoners were beaten, deprived of sleep, and threatened with death. There are boxes of documents from the London Cage Detention Center. They were scoured right after the war and in investigative journalism 6 decades later. And only one credited accusation of torture there has ever been raised. A Nazi captain named Fritz Knocklein said he was deprived of sleep, left dressed only in pajamas, and kicked. 2 separate inquiries found nothing in Knocklein's claims except the record of the staff at this London Cage place bringing in the local London police to help calm down a prisoner who had become hysterical. Fritz Knocklein. The cops found Knocklein screaming but unhurt and in good health. Knocklein's testimony did not hold up to scrutiny in 1946, and it does not now, yet Fox News takes it, the only claim of torture under Churchill's premiership, and presents that allegation as fact. The allegation of a convicted Nazi war criminal. The allegation of a man executed for having murdered 92 British prisoners of war. This is the second time Fox News Channel and its commentator have taken propaganda from the putrid and long-dead Nazi regime, blaming the Allies for Nazi war crimes, and claimed it was true, and that British or American versions supported by neutral witnesses and investigations, that those were the lies. Talk about the modern-day equivalent of Nazi appeasers. Mr. Murdoch, you have a retroactive Nazi appeaser on your network every night. President Obama's British example was wrong. Fortunately, it was not. Unfortunately, nor was George Orwell's. Who controls the past indeed controls the future. Who controls the present surely controls the past. Fortunately, those who would usurp that control from the auspices of the facts and give it to that of the falsehoods, the commentators of Fox News, are at best mediocre at perverting history. Obama, more correctly, history was right. Churchill did not torture. Alas, if only we could say the same of Bush.